Ladies and gentlemen, put your fangirl hands together for your childhood hero, Gavin Rolf, the Postman Larsen. Gavin, welcome to the show. Welcome to Become Your Own Superhero.
G'day, Laban. Yep, Rolf was my middle name. Bless my dad. And the Postman, the Postman, that brings back memories as well.
Well, I'm glad. It's an affectionate name that was, I think, must have been given to you by your teammates at the time. Are you able to explain why they called you the Postman?
No, it wasn't my teammates, actually, to be honest. I'll take you back to '96, New Zealand tour of the West Indies, and the memory comes flooding back. We were at Sabina Park, Jamaica. We were playing in a test match down there, and I was fielding down at fine leg in front of a part of the ground that they affectionately call the mound, which is a big grass sort of section. If you field too long down in front of the mound, you'll end up being high. Beautiful aromas that sort of waft off the mound, and I was bowling okay. And I'd had a reasonable tour, and the West Indies fans had sort of taken me a little bit under their wing, actually, to be fair. And it was a bloody great tour, actually, the one of the Indies. And anyway, I started hearing him behind me from the mound. Hey, well bowled, Posty. Hey, Posty, sign this. And I said, hey, what are you on about, Posty? Postman, you always deliver. So yeah, then a couple of my teammates picked up on it as well, and then it sort of grew a few arms and legs from there.
What a great nickname for starters. You know, given the multitude of other ones that have been designated to other players across different teams. But you're a retired, proud Blackcaps player, and didn't play a crazy amount of tests versus some of the more modern players these days, I think, based on the sheer volume of tests that were available. And I was trawling through some of your stats, and I don't know that you ever had an opportunity to get a run out in a test match. Is that one of life's great regrets, or were you always fielding down at fine leg?
I didn't play many tests, Laban, to be fair. I blame the selectors, of course, and isn't it ironic that I now wear a selection hat? I reckon I got dropped about 15 times by the New Zealand selectors, because what would happen is I think I was probably one of the first names down when it came to the ODI team through that particular sort of phase. And normally then the test matches will get bolted onto the end of the ODI series. And, unfortunately, Chris Harris and I would, tend to get a bit of a little tap on the shoulder at the end of the one-day series. I got some bad news for you. You have a team. Oh, shit. Well, okay. That's 7 times I've been dropped, 8 times I've been dropped. I mean, look, any cricketer will tell you, Laban, that it's the ultimate playing test match cricket. I played 8 tests. I can remember them all vividly. I thought my strike rate was okay, actually. I 24 wickets in those 8 tests. But, I mean, my issue was, the ball coming out at sort of, less than 120k wasn't going to strike any fear into batsmen's hearts. And if I was going to make a test team, it wasn't going to be in the front line 3 sort of quick bowlers. You'd have to be carrying a 4th seamer, or I'd have to play as an all-rounder. So I never really established a role in test match cricket, and hence, I found that niche in the white ball game.
Well, you did a wonderful, wonderful job for New Zealand in that role, and I want to explore this being dropped, because we had the absolute delight of having Chris Rogers come round to the house the other day and film. And he was dropped after 1 test, and then it took him an awfully long time to get back. And he talks about the mental challenges around just the tenacity to get back. But you've been dropped multiple times. How did you deal with that whole mental starting again kind of process?
Yeah, look, I think I'm probably a little bit tongue-in-cheek. The reality is, and I'll bring it back to how I was explaining my skill set. As much as I, tried and trained to turn myself into what I would consider to be a genuine all-rounder, someone who could bat six, maybe seven, and then contribute as the fourth seamer. I couldn't quite scale up my skills to that level. So I actually flick it round in my own mind. I actually, thank my lucky stars that I got the positive phone call, and played 8 test matches. So I'm probably jesting a little bit. If I can link it to ODI cricket though, I remember in the World Cup in '99, that was in England, and we had a must-win game on a dirty green seamer up in Scotland, in Edinburgh, and we were playing the locals. I was playing the Scotland team, and I couldn't believe it. The night before, I had a knock on the hotel door, and it was Clement, who was the captain, and he basically just said, "Look, I got some bad news for you. You're not playing tomorrow." And I was gobsmacked. I didn't know how to react, and it was the first time that I actually believed that, my whole white ball career, that I'd actually been dropped from a team. I asked him for his logic and his rationale as to why I was being dropped, and he said basically that we needed to win by a certain margin in that game to make sure that we could then qualify for the Super Sixes. So we had to comprehensively beat Scotland. And so they decided to go with the more attacking bowlers. My answer to Flem was, well, you give me a club deck that's got, got a little bit of sideways, and mate, I'll do the job for you. I'll pick up man of the match for you and get 4 for 20. And he said, "Oh, look, the decision's been made." So I was pretty devastated by that. As it turned out, we won the game the next day. The guy that took my spot, a guy called Carl Bulfin, not a overly familiar name to a lot of probably fans around the world, but he didn't play very much for NZ. He went for about 6 and over, only bowled about 3 or 4 overs if my memory's right. And I sneaked straight back into the team from that point on. The bottom line to that story, Laban, was about 5 years later. I remember, knocking into Flem at the bar and having a chat with him. I'd retired at that stage. And I said, "Mate, I want to take you back to Edinburgh." And he said, "Don't even go there." I was wrong.
That's all you want. Just an admission of guilt. Yeah. That's it. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Now, Gavin, you're heavily involved with the Blackcaps now and heavily involved with the selection side of things. And I'm going to throw a curly one at you. Taking the stats away from your cricketing career, if you had an opportunity, would you pick Gavin Larsen back in the 90s as a player in the Blackcap side for your work?
Good question.
Compared to what's available now?
Yeah, instinctively my answer is no, because the game's moved on. The game's moved on dramatically since the way we played white ball cricket back in the 90s. Back then in New Zealand conditions in particular, the pitches were a little bit slower. There wasn't a lot of bounce. And so they were absolutely tailor-made for guys like myself, Chris Harris, who I've mentioned, the Willie Watsons of this world. The guys that just had this ability to run in and stick a hanky down, back of a length, ball hitting top of off, and 5 balls out of 6, you can achieve that. We had a skill set, bowlers like us. These days, the game's moved on. The game's played at greater pace. There's more power. The bats are bigger and fatter. The boundaries are in. And, the way you've got to play the game of cricket now is in a more attacking way. So, wearing a selector's hat now, when we pick a team, we're picking attacking bowlers as opposed to defensive bowlers. Possibly a little bit different in T20 cricket in some respects, where dot balls are so crucial. Deep in my heart, I still think that, there's nothing more joyous to me, Laban, than to see a guy being able to, run in and hit a length and hit the splice and, keep guys really honest. But the game has moved on, and, I think to answer your question in full, I would have adapted my game to the changing game, and I would get selected. There you go.
I'm glad you said that, and thanks for your honesty, Gavin. One thing that I've noticed in the last few years is that I've come to learn that this natural talent that people have in life isn't largely never natural. And sure, you can be born 6'4" and have a predisposition to play basketball, right? But I've learned that pretty much everything in life can be these learned talents. And when you realize that that's now possible, it changes the game with everything, and your ability to adapt just goes through the roof because you then believe that you can do it. And I think Charles Darwin said something about it's not the smartest that survive, it's the fastest to adapt. And so I've been adding that in all areas of my life now and finding that I'm able to progress significantly faster because I was just, 5'9", just mediocre pace, playing rugby at Christchurch Boys High and played in the third 15 and probably would have played in the second 15 or the first 15 at another high school. If we can spread this message to children and empower them and say, you can actually do whatever you want. You gotta love it. And I suppose my next question for you, Gavin, is when did you realise that you loved the game of cricket? What age do you remember that you loved the game of cricket?
Mate, I was brought up in a sporting family. My old man played National League football, so he was a round ball man. So I loved my footy. Played a lot of rep football actually, and if I'm brutally honest, probably football or soccer, as it was known back then, was probably my real passion. I loved my cricket. Don't get me wrong. And I played for the local club down in Johnsonville in Wellington, Johnsonville Cricket Club, and I did everything that young fellas did. I had a great little group of mates, Mike and Mark. I remember really well. We used to spend hour after hour up in the Johnsonville cricket nets in summer, and then we would be kicking the ball around on the bottom field at Alex Moore Park. When winter rolled round, we played footy and cricket together, and then it was just interesting. The way I guess the path moves, over the years through your teenage years. Cricket started to become a greater part of my life. I used to go and watch my old man play a lot. We played senior cricket for Johnsonville. I started to score, take my little scorebook along, and I used to score with my HB pencil and a square when a wide's bowled, and I just found that the passion grew. So it was a little bit like what you were referring to before. I was sort of a bit learned, I guess. The football was very natural and intuitive, but I reached that crossroads through the back end of my sort of teenage years, back end of college years, where it got a little bit more difficult because I was in the rep pathway in Wellington in both sports, and I had an opportunity to start thinking about going to England for the first time to play cricket, and I took that, and that was the fork in the road, and I took that path, and never looked back. But I must admit, coming back and putting the footy boots on every now and then was still seemed to shiver up the spine as well.
Well, and the country's grateful that you made that decision. I mean, do you think that given the experience you've got in your role as a senior selector, if you were plonked to the New Zealand football side, could you select a champion side without having that depth of experience in the soccer? And do a good job?
Tricky question that. I don't know the football scene too intimately, too deeply. What I know is that it's travelling in the right direction here in New Zealand. The advent of the Phoenix, and things are getting a lot slicker with these third-party academies, and there's a conveyor belt now of young talent that's coming through, heading off to the likes of America with their football scholarships, into Europe. It's just very disappointing, being a football fan as well, that we don't see our All Whites playing, a consistent amount of a volume of international football, because you can only get better by playing on the big stage. And I guess if I bring it back to cricket, that's where we're very, very lucky. We are now, I think, unashamedly, we can say we're one of the, the leading countries in cricket in the world. We're too right, yeah. And I think we should fist pump. It's, we've done a lot of things right over the last decade or so, and we've got our systems and processes in place. Use a cliche, really, really well. There's not too many loose ends now. There's always hot spots, of course there is. There is in anything in life. But we're doing things pretty well, Laban. And, I can go back probably, 10 to 15 years where the advent of the Cricket Players Association, kicking into that true professional sort of way of playing the game, a change in governance at New Zealand cricket level. And I'm a firm believer in everything starts at the top. A really strong board, good management at New Zealand cricket level, filtering down to our major associations. Much better coaching structures, and the bricks and mortar. The facilities. That 22 yards of grassy strip that to me means so much and is so pivotal as to how we're going to bring our young cricketers through. And that's, I'm talking about out in the middle, but I'm probably just as importantly talking about the training facilities that we're offering our younger cricketers. It's all there now. Everything's there. We've still got a lot of work to do, don't get me wrong, but I think if you now look at the ICC rankings and you see where the Blackcaps are positioned, then I think we can be, we can be pretty happy with the progress we've made.
I think New Zealand cricket, from a fan point of view, from my side, has been just, I'm so proud to be a Blackcap supporter and to see the trajectory go up over the last few years. And going through the highs and the lows of the most recent World Cup, and how New Zealand cricket is observed from a fan point of view outside of New Zealand. We are, near and dear to pretty much every country in the planet. We've been able to get to that level without compromising a lot of values. And, I get sort of shivers down my spine thinking about it. One of the things that just popped into my head, Gavin, would be Jesse Ryder. Is he one of, and I have a lot of respect for Jesse, and having gone through my own troubles with addiction, I really empathise with what he's gone through. Do you see Jesse Ryder as someone that, had he been able to get himself right, would have been an extraordinary contributor to New Zealand cricket?
Oh, mate, he would have been an extraordinary contributor to global cricket. When I first saw Jesse hitting balls, I had a stint as CEO at Cricket Wellington. I'll come back to that. Prior to that, I had been in the training facility down at the stadium in Wellington, and he was hitting some balls in there. And mate, I'll be brutally honest, I've never seen anybody other than Ross Taylor hit the ball so cleanly with so much power. And he just had this innate ability to, the ball was just hitting the middle of his bat. And I said at that point, and I was actually almost on record at Cricket Wellington, as saying, this guy will kick on, he'll get 5,000 test runs, he'll get 5,000 plus ODI runs, and T20 cricket was only, in fact, it was only just being given birth to. God knows what he would have achieved in T20 cricket. So, look, it's a sad story. It's a tragic story that we've had someone of Jesse's ability slip through the net. But there's also a lot of lessons, for not only cricket, but I think in sport in general, as to, how we help and assist and manage guys who have got troubles. And Jesse had troubles, there's no doubt about that. And to help them, through those tough periods, because, we should be sitting here now still watching Jesse in his absolute pomp, destroying attacks, around the world. and it's not to be, and it won't to be now. Won't be now. Nature's taken its course. But there's lessons there too.
It's look, there is some wonderful lessons that will come out of this, Gavin, and I'm curious to know what's in place now for players from grassroots up to help mitigate this and cut this off before it becomes, lost.
Well, one of the greatest moves, I guess, or the progress that we've made in New Zealand cricket, and I mentioned the Cricket Players Association, the CPA, before. They've done a very, very good job, and their role is a simple one. It's they are the players' organisation. They represent the players' interests. They do whatever they feel they need to do to protect the players' interests. And it's been a little different to, you glimpse across the Tasman and you see, some of the angst and the tension and the conflict that exists between the players and the administrators.
Yeah.
In Australia. We haven't actually had that issue here. Don't get me wrong. There's always little hot spots, and there are very robust conversations. And when it comes to resetting the master agreement, the deal between the professional deal between the CPA, New Zealand Cricket, and the 6 major associations, there's always going to be some blood on the ceiling. But it all happens within 4 walls. And once everything does get signed off, we're all swimming in the same direction. Now, part and parcel of that MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding, that does get signed every 4 or 5 years, is around player development and player welfare and what processes get put in place, to assist players in the areas that we've just been talking about. And I've seen that area grow substantially. And to bring it into the current situation that we're, battling with around the world with COVID, it was very interesting to me to see that the activity from the Players Association actually went up a notch through this period. Their engagement with the players was, it was all consuming, and they were out there. They were, looking after their constituent members. They were caring for them. They were putting in place what they needed to, and it's going to remain tough. But I think we've got, between New Zealand Cricket and the Players Association, we've got some good building blocks in place now to look after our players and to help shape them. And in particular, Laban, I think one of the key focuses has to be, what is life after cricket going to look like, and how am I going to position myself to drive or leverage off what I achieve in cricket, but importantly, what happens if my knee blows out after 2 years of class cricket and I'm actually out into the big wide world, because you've got to make sure you start positioning yourself early on.
Yeah, and it's world leading stuff, Gavin. And it's the rest of the other cricket playing countries should take notice, and I think some do it better than others. Being involved in at a premier level over here, so you do get some exposure to state and some international players. They have had their challenges. It's still run incredibly well, from what I can tell. But what I was going to say is that one of the things that I'm very passionate about, Gavin, as a speaker and as a coach, in terms of like an accountability coach, not a sporting coach, is that when I was able to understand that a lot of the things that I experienced in my youth, which was simply like a child of divorce and parents that did the best they could, but were also the product of divorce and dysfunction, is that when I was able to understand that all of these things that happened to me are actually now gifts rather than burdens, that desire to want to escape and to do drugs and to drink and to, just be out of my head, dissipated immediately. And I feel like that someone like, just going back to Jesse, for example, there must be a litany of people that have experienced trauma or dysfunction in some way, shape or form, and they just do what they know best to try and cope with it. And clearly, booze was one of his demons. So is there much focus on that side of the player management as well, or am I starting to get real deep on you?
Oh, look, I mean, deep, but it's part and parcel of what we deal with in professional sport. So, I mean, mental health. You know, cricket is an unforgiving sport. I mean, it's a shocker. You know, you nick out first ball as an opener, you sit around all day, and all you're doing is reliving that one ball that was bowled. And it might have been a jaffa, and you could do nothing about it, or you might have actually, you know, a bit hard at it, and you're sitting there pulling the hair out for the rest of the day. And then you don't get a bat in the second innings because you've won by an innings, and next game's rained out, and then you get caught on a dodgy pitch, or an umpire fires you out. It's a demanding game, and I guess as a selector, you know, one of my key, I guess, philosophies is around communication and you know, the nature of communication and the empathy that I believe is needed when you're, you know, talking to players, you know, both when you're delivering positive messages and a negative, you know, a Dear John phone call. I mean, they're terrible phone calls that you have to make. But, you know, I do believe if you make them the right way, then hopefully, you know, sometimes it's white noise and you need to have a backup call. But you know, you need to leave a player understanding the logic around, you know, why they haven't made a team. But what I know, having been dropped 15 times in my life, is that it messes with your head and it's tough. So to look back to your question, you know, yes, there are mechanisms, there are processes in place now. But one of my messages to any sportsman is, you know, whilst there might be support structures that are in place, you know, you don't want it to be the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff sort of thing. It's very, very important that if as a sportsman you're feeling under pressure, if things aren't feeling normal, if there are peripheral distractions that are being brought to the table, we've talked about the likes of alcohol and the Jessies, reach out, talk, communicate. You know, people you trust. You know, don't be shy about opening up to people, because we're human beings. We're born to communicate. You know, please don't bottle things up. There you go. That's probably a bit heavy as well.
Mate, it's great. It's great. It's great coming from someone of such authority in the game, because the stigma around just getting the shit off your chest, like, it's actually really cathartic. And when you become comfortable, like I have over the last few years, I am like unashamed with sharing all of my demons, because it's allowed me to really grow, and I then own everything that's happened to me, and it's allowed me to move forward, and then no one can hold anything against you, because you've shared it with them, right? And anyone that's going to hold it against you is not someone you want in your life. But
that's right.
With regards to your role in the Blackcaps in this selection, you're making the phone calls to select and drop blokes at times?
We share that. So we just have the two formal selectors, and Gary Stead, who's the head coach and head selector, on the selection manager. So I look after all selection, I guess, administration, organisation, dealing stakeholder communication with major associations, and scheduling around the season. So that's my job. We have some very, very good key scouts around the country that we bring to the table and into the selection process. But at the end of the day, Gary and I are the two formal selectors. On tour, it's a little bit different, where I don't tour with the Blackcaps more often than not, and so Gary will work more closely with the likes of Kane as the skipper, and potentially one or more of the senior leaders within the unit when it comes to on tour selection. But what we do is I'll always let Gary make the decision as to whether he wants to liaise and talk to a particular player about either being selected or dropped. So, you know, I make it very clear I'm not, you know, I'm not ducking away from from the responsibilities of giving a hard message. You know, you've got to be willing to do that. But there are certain times where the coach will feel that he sort of feels, I guess, more obliged to make that call than maybe, someone like myself.
What do you think's more challenging, Gavin? Dropping a black cap who's played, let's say, 10 tests, or dropping a fourth grade 16-year-old who's played 3 games?
It's all tough. It's not an easy task telling anybody that they haven't made a team. And look, we've just been through our central contracting process, where we have selected our top 20 cricketers who are always thrilled when they get told that they're centrally contracted. That's payday. And in New Zealand, Laban, there is a gap that I believe is too big between the bottom of the central contracts and the top of the major association contracts. So when you remove someone from the central contract list and drop them back down to MA cricket, even though they're not potentially a stand-up, first 11 Blackcap starter, a Taylor, a Williamson, a Southey, a Bolt type player, it's still a very hard message to give. And similarly, when I deal with the major associations, they're going through their contracting process at the moment. They're talking about, do they contract 17, 18, 19-year-olds at the bottom of their food chain? And I know that they have the same issues in terms of the toughness of those, that communication that's got to be made to those players. And so we try to be as aligned as we can be, being empathetic, making sure that all the right people have the consistent messages, so the players aren't thinking, on one hand, I've been told this by Gav, and on this other hand, Steady said something, and that doesn't quite line up with what. And then I've got my MA coach coming from a slightly different perspective as well. So we try to join the dots up as much as we can from a comms point of view before the actual one-on-one message is made.
That's really good, Gavin. And I appreciate you going into that much sort of detail, because it's really helpful. And I was sort of more referring to the as captain of the 4th grade at Melbourne University Cricket Club, and the average age being about 19. They're all young to be my son, and still the hormones are flowing and like. But I'd like to ask you to share your favourite cricketing memory with us, if you could.
Oh wow, goodness me, where do you start?
And please be shameless as you like. This is the time. Drop the ego, pump it up.
Yeah, look, it's probably going to be an event rather than something personal. I mean, there's lots of moments and lots of games where I think I've contributed well, and we've won games of cricket, maybe because of my performance, or my performance has assisted to have a win. And there's nothing better, Laban, than winning a game of cricket for your country.
Pakistan?
Stand up on the table in the middle of the changing room after a win, only after a win, and the team pledge will get, told by everybody around the table with a beer in hand, and they're fantastic. The moments for me probably are centred around World Cups, because they, for me, being an ODI sort of specialist in a way, that was always my pinnacle, to play in World Cups. So I played 92 here in New Zealand, in Australia, 96 on the subcontinent, and 99 in England, which I mentioned before. All 3 of those events, they were fantastic. But the one that's just, and obviously now as a selector last year, what happened in England, the tragedy, of what. I mean, we're all going to take it to our grave. I really want to call it the most enjoyable, memorable, cricketing moment, but boy, in terms of something being seared into your memory, nothing is ever going to beat that. We were stiffed big time. And as a team, as a squad, as a management group, as an organisation, boy, we ourselves well. I think there might be a couple of countries around the world that wouldn't have handled themselves quite as well, to be brutally honest. But
100%, yeah.
It was a fantastic experience, and one that will never ever be forgiven. But for me, '92, the World Cup, when I was playing some pretty good cricket. We were incredibly well led by Marty Crowe. No one gave us a chance before that tournament, even though we were playing at home. We come off the back of a absolute rubbish, absolute rubbish ODI series against England where we'd been towed. Things were in disarray. There was a bit of captaincy issue with Marty and the New Zealand Cricket Board, and we were, in a way, we were sort of in disarray, but we hit the ground running at Eden Park against Aussie. And we just found this momentum, and it actually carried us right through. And we found a blueprint. Marty was superb as captain. He moved us around the chessboard, in his own Marty Crowe way. Best tactical captain I ever played with, and a magnificent player, stating the obvious. And we gained this sort of momentum through that tournament that saw us playing the semi-final at Eden Park, and that probably is the moment. And even though we lost that game, that's a memory that still I can still feel it. I can hear the crowd. I can feel the tears running down my cheeks after the game as we did a lap, because I tell you what, mate, we could have and probably should have won that World Cup. We had the team, we were performing, we had the confidence, which is crucial, and we had the momentum, and Inzamam got us on the day, the bugger.
I was on a scout camp in the hills of Canterbury, listening to it on a wireless radio, and I remember crying. It's like it's etched in my memory. I can't hardly remember anything from my childhood, but I remember that Scouts honour.
Right, it was an awesome tournament, and I look back now, and I think to myself, how lucky was I to have been able to have experienced something like that, to be walking through airports in New Zealand with, people coming up to you and clapping, and mate, even the politicians were in the changing room. Things are going well when they knock on the door and want to come and have a beer with you. So it was tremendous. '96 had its good moments. We lost the quarterfinal in Madras against a very good Australian team. We got done by Mark Waugh, who played, I thought, one of the great one-day knocks in that quarterfinal. And in '99, Jeff Allett and co. Jeff Allett with his, sock hanging out of his with a hole in the front of the boot, had a great tournament. We made a semi-final again against our old foe, the Pakistanis, and probably, that was the one team I thought we probably didn't, quite have the team to go on and maybe win a World Cup. But, what we have done over the years in ICC events is we've certainly proved, haven't we, New Zealand, that, we can foot it in those tournaments.
Oh, never a prouder moment watching the Blackcaps these days, Gavin. It's a real thrill, and you're directly, involved with that. So we thank you for your service. Gavin, I'm very conscious of your very busy schedule. You've got a lot going on in your life. I wonder if we might be able to finish up with sharing your suggestions to not just cricketers, but anyone that's involved in trying to progress in their life. What are the key attributes that you look for in picking the best squad possible that don't relate to cricket?
Yeah, look, and I don't want this to sound cliched, but the first thing when you ask that is good people. So the skills are one thing, but we unashamedly look at the All Blacks environment, because we believe and have believed for over a decade now that they are a best practice sporting organisation that extols everything in terms of excellence. So why wouldn't you look into an environment like that and pick off the bits that you think, you know, you can apply to your organisation. And I know that Mike Hessen, when he was coach and when I first started the selecting job about 5 or 6 years ago, he unashamedly, you know, said he works closely with the AB hierarchy. And we've all heard about the no dickheads sort of, you know, policy. Better people make better sportsmen. It makes things more enjoyable in a general, more holistic sense. And, you know, I'm a massive firm believer in that. So when it actually does come to shaping teams and squads, Laban, we look at the person and we try to understand the person and what makes them tick, what their strengths and weaknesses are. Naturally, of course, we're looking at their ability to, you know, play a full defensive shot or shape an outswinger, or, you know, do you offer us all-round skills so you can bat at 6 and bowl as a fourth seamer? Do we, you know, will you be a second spinner for us? Of course. And the stats, you roll the stats into all that. But do not ignore the personal, that personal sort of attribute side as well. Very, very, very important piece of the puzzle for us. And that all feeds up into an overarching philosophy that we have in the Blackcaps that we call team first. So team first principles. You know, we want our cricketers to live and die by that principle. You know, the days of, you know, blocking that last ball and pushing it out to cover and, you know, it's a dot ball and you end up with 42 not out, they're gone. You know, that last ball needs to get hit over cover for 6, because that might be the 6 runs that win you the game. So I think you'll get a sense of what I mean by that. So being selfless, putting team before self, very, very important. And the only other thing, mate, I'd mention is, and you sort of alluded to this early on when we were talking about, I used to be a batsman when I was growing up, and I just bowled these awful little sort of medium paces. I went to England for my first club cricket stint, and I'd fibbed. I was a genuine all-rounder, I told them. So, of course, I got thrown the ball, and I was opening the bowling into the wind. And my first, I thought, shit, I better actually work on my bowling here a little bit. What I found was actually inside this boring little medium pacer from Monslow Cricket Club body, that I actually did have a skill to be able to, you know, put the ball, you know, in the right areas more often than not. And the way things actually panned out was my bowling improved. My batting did fall away a bit. I didn't want it to fall away, but it's just the way it is. Life is like that. You know, you need to be flexible. You need to make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. You've got to learn from those mistakes and kick on. And those 2 years I had playing in that Yorkshire League were absolutely pivotal in defining, you know, where I was going to go in my cricket. And boy, I did make a lot of mistakes, but the one thing I'd say is I think I learned from the majority of them and then managed to put sort of plans in place. And, you know, mate, I kicked on and played for Wellington, and then I was very, very lucky and played for my country as well. But I look back on that little period in league cricket in England with, a little bit of pride, actually.
Well, Gavin Larsen, you are the epitome, in my opinion, of someone who has become their own superhero. It's been an absolute thrill, delight, and just pleasure to have you on the show today. We thank you so much for your time. Gavin Larsen, everybody.
Thanks for having me, mate. Great having a chat.